Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Project Egg Show. I'm your host, Ben Gothard, and today we have the honor of speaking with Ishveen Anand. How you doing today, Ishveen?
Good, thank you, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here, because I am super duper excited to ask you, what is your story?
Broad. Where should I start?
The very beginning.
Very quickly then. I'm not the best storyteller, but I'm decent. But grew up in Manchester, England, played sports all my life, graduated from Oxford, became a management consultant in London, loved it for about a year and then a couple of years, and then realised my passion was sports. So moved to India, 2009, became a sports agent. Fast forward, fell in love with sponsorship, met my husband, fell in love with him, moved to New York, realised sponsorship was broken and set up essentially the Match.com of sports sponsorship, and that's about 4 years ago. And ever since then, I've been a hardworking entrepreneur.
Wow, that's like a lot of years in like a very short amount of time. So, what was it like growing up where you did?
Manchester.
Yeah.
Super cool. I love it. I think it's a big city. I'm a city girl, but it's also not so large like London that you get lost, I suppose. And then my parents were both doctors, so enjoyed having kind of that routine growing up, and yeah, it was awesome.
Wait, what routine?
Routine, like I'd say, like I think homely. Like I describe my parents as super homely. I think they're both general practitioners, so I think having, I could tell you, like in the holidays I would work at my dad's surgery. My maiden name was Jolly, so my dad's practice was called Jolly Medical Center. It's just like a beautiful place to work in the summer, and it's great stuff.
That's awesome. What were some of the most meaningful experiences you had there?
Good question. I'd say life in Manchester came down to school, and obviously family. Family, I have two amazing sisters, and so I'd say family life is really strong, and still to this day I think making my family proud or whatever else drives me a lot. And then school was essentially sports and studies, which essentially got me into Oxford, which was a launch pad for everything else I've achieved. So thankful to Manchester and my school for enabling me to have that path.
You mentioned the whole idea of making your family proud, and I totally understand that. Coming from my family too. How do you think that shaped you?
I think you can get into routine and become lazy in life pretty quickly. So in the sense of days roll into weeks roll into months roll into years, and what do you have to show for it? And I think having something to having to report, it's almost like investor updates. Make sure that every quarter is good and the end of a quarter is a big push. In the same way, if you have family or friends or whoever that you're trying to make proud, you're constantly looking for ways to make them proud, right? And so I suppose it pushes you in a way to achieve things for the right reasons as well, that you can essentially report back. So I suppose it makes sure that you're not stagnant in life. The same way, actually I've never thought of that analogy, but the same way that investors, probably one of the best things is they make you feel accountable. Even if they don't read the updates, you feel like you have to provide something good in those updates.
Right. Do you feel like that ever pushed you to to try new things or to try different things that maybe you wouldn't have tried otherwise or done otherwise?
I think I actually wouldn't say that one so much. I think the constant desire to be happy and self-fulfilled is what causes that. And then once you have that path, I'd say that the making the family proud means you make it work. So if I reflect on when I've had major changes in life, they've actually come from me. Whether it's like moving to India to be a sports agent or moving to America to marry my husband, like I'd say those are things that have come from within me. But once you've made that decision, it's okay, how do I make the most of this to almost validate my decision back home?
That's interesting. Do you ever feel like the things that you're doing and striving for, do you ever feel like there will be any sort of conclusion or finality to it?
Well, I'd like to think on your deathbed, but before that would be a bit miserable if you stop. I think things change, right? Like, you potentially have kids and maybe your priorities shift of what you're focusing on. Like, at the moment I'm trying to grow our company from like 12 people to 20 people, right? I'm hoping in a year's time that milestone is different. So I think your milestones keep changing, but the idea that I'm sure even like Bill Gates would say he's still trying to solve something or make Melinda Gates feel like proud of him for something. So I think the feeling of wanting to achieve something new or achieve something shouldn't change. It's just what that is should.
So then what's the end goal? If that's always it's like pushing back the goalpost, like what is the goal then?
Impact, right? So if you think about like what does legacy mean, what does impact mean, it's you're not pushing out the same goal. It's almost like you're hitting it, but you're setting yourself a new one up to strive for. So I think the idea being that I can't today donate $1 million to charity, right? I'm just not in that financial situation. I hope at some point I am, but I can't strive for that goal today. I need to do the baby steps to get there. And so I think that's the idea is, I mean, for me anyway, is that I'm going to impact a lot of people. And these little baby steps are going to get me to that point.
So then how big do you set your goals? I mean, if you're working on baby steps, you definitely have to have way bigger steps too, that you can't walk to something if you don't know where you're going to walk to. I mean, I guess you could, but like how do you set those big goals?
I actually have to admit that, I mean, I'm different. I think people are different, but I personally am not like a massive big goal setter. I've been, as an entrepreneur, you act kind of on impulse, and I'd say that's definitely me. And so I think one reason is probably because goals are there to be sometimes challenge you but get missed. And secondly, do you even really 100% know what that end goal should be? And if you sit down to think about it, then that's taking time away from what you should be doing today, right? So I'm definitely a more of a, okay, let's just keep chipping away and let's keep doing it, which I'm not saying is right. And it's come up in conversations with friends when they're like, well, what's your big plan? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, like I'm just gonna go to work tomorrow, get that shit done, and go to LA on Wednesday and do that. And then I know where there's an end in sight, but it's not like I labor over thinking about that. I'm laboring over what I need to do today.
So it's almost like focusing so much on the present that later on kind of takes care of itself.
I think so. What do you think?
I'm not sure.
Would you say you're a big plan maker or a...
I'd say I definitely have big plans, but I adjust them. I mean, I may be dead set on something today, and then tomorrow I may get a phone call that just, I'm like, oh, well, now I need to pivot this or shift this or move this. So, to your point, I may be laboring over a lot of things that in, 3 weeks I may change anyway. So, I don't know. And I don't think there is a right answer. I certainly don't know the right answer, but that's why I like to ask questions of smart people like you.
Well, we'll see. But yeah, I think... I personally just don't like to waste time on the wrong questions. And for me, the wrong question is, so what's the company? What are you going to be doing in 5 years? That's like the wrong question. I'm not sure if it is. For some people, that might be the right question, but for me, it's not.
So what is the right question?
How am I going to hit my 5-month plan? Yeah.
So how do you set those, and how do you prioritize what you need to do in order to get those done?
Yeah, That's a good question. I think so. If it's business, then obviously it's around. Okay, well, what's realistic? What can we get done? Where do we need to be? Will we run out of money? Or what are the decisions that go into that? And if it's personal, then I say it's like, what are the drivers, right? Where today I could tell you like most of my plans are business, not personal. So that kind of gets on hold, and I'm sure I'll switch at some point, but yeah.
So is it like a 80-20, like a 90-10? Like what is that ratio of business to personal?
In terms of thought, focus?
Yeah, thought, focus, time.
Yeah. 90-10.
Really?
Yeah.
Has it always been like that, or have you evolved over time?
That is a good question. I don't think I've ever spent that much time thinking about what doesn't really matter. So even like personal, like, you know, where should we eat tonight? I've never been that person who's going to spend 3 hours researching the right restaurant, right? Like that's just like not me. So I suppose work has always been where I've given my brain to, even if I wasn't working that much harder, because I'm pretty laissez-faire in everything else, right? So I'm pretty okay with like going with the flow. If I turn up at a restaurant and I don't order the most like best dish on the menu, I'm okay. Like I'll live.
I'm so similar. So let me ask. Whenever you find yourself in social situations, is it kind of the same way where you're like, I make enough decisions at work, like it's like you're focusing so much on that with other things you're like, whatever, it'll be fine.
Exactly, which is why it can be 9-10, because like I think I know what I want to think about, and anything else I just don't need. Yeah. So
how does that impact the relationships in your life?
Well, my husband loves to make a lot of the decisions, so I'm actually quite lucky that it balances out quite nicely. I'm sure I've definitely got friends who thought I didn't make enough effort, like generally effort.
Yeah.
But for me, just turning up, like, let me just turn up and we'll figure it out. Like, here's a great example. Maybe I used to be different. Like, I used to, when I was younger, I try and fit everyone into like 1 hour slots, and I'd try and see 7 people in the evening. Very New York, right? The very New York way. And then I realized that, well, obviously most of my friends are in England. And then I realized that like, you don't really have good quality time with anyone, because you turn up and you're spending half the time just focused on where you're meeting your next person, and you're half in, half out. So I'm really good at like, if I'm doing a one-on-one, like having dinner with someone, I don't even look at my phone. It could be 5 hour, 6 hour dinner. Like I won't look at my phone. So I'm super present. And I think that's what's really important, which is like, what's important. It's not like ordering, it's not like whatever, but it's about being present, listening, being there for them. But then I am obviously, the challenge is like when I'm not there, I'm not the best at staying in touch and, whatever else. So I think just knowing who you are and who you want to be, like, do you want to be the person that turns up and orders everything and is on your phone and figuring things out, or do you want to just be chilled?
That's so interesting. It's so nice to meet like a kindred spirit there. It really is. So when you are working and like you're in the zone, you're in your flow state, whatever those buzzwords mean.
Yeah.
Like, what is your superpower? What do you do best?
I think I can see things quite clearly. So, 2 things I think. One is I have an advisor who gave me this phrase, strong convictions loosely held. So the ability to like see things pretty clearly and understand what needs to be done, like map it out, like, and then I'm not like on the fence about things. So I if I believe it can be done, or I believe it should be done, I firmly believe it, and I will figure out a way to do it, right? So I'll put the plan in place and whatever else. And then loosely held is important, because it means that if someone comes along with a data point or a thought that shows what you're doing is incorrect, then I'm okay to move, because again, I can clearly see, well, okay, with that viewpoint, with that data point or whatever else, let's switch the strategy up. So I think it's about, I just know I know, ironic because we talked about not having plans, but I can see my path to where I want to go. I can see what that end point looks like. I know how we can get there. So I think that's probably my superpower.
It almost sounds like at the core of that, it's like you're getting out of your own way. Because I feel like a lot of people, like if they make a decision or they hold a belief to be true, they attach their identity to it. So then if you bring up some sort of evidence supporting something else, you're like, oh no, wait a second.
Yeah.
You're just trying to invalidate me, but it's really not them. It's like the belief that they're holding.
Yeah.
So it seems like a lot of that ties into, to ego and to really getting out of your own way.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I definitely don't. You're right. I think people do justify the thing that they said. And I think for me, I just have I feel like I can get a lot of clarity on what needs to be done, and there's no bias in there. So.
How do you do that?
I don't know. I've never been asked that before. Trying to think of a specific example of something. I'm very good at understanding. So, I have people who work with me, and I always tell them, never do a job unless you understand the objective, the why, right? And then once you know the why, question 100%, do you believe that this thing is going to get you to that why, right? And for example, some of my account management team will often have to pitch things, and I'm always like, don't pitch something you don't believe in, because the chances are you won't pitch it well. And so I think the whole thing about it is having complete clarity on what are you doing and why you're doing it. And I think that's what people get stuck in corporate a lot, where they're on this treadmill of doing things for the sake of doing things. And that, as we can tell from this conversation, I never do anything for the sake of it unless I believe it's going to help. And so I think I just understand the end goal, and therefore I don't know. Sounds like a lot of eyes in here, but I'm not really sure.
So it almost seems like, again, it almost seems like you're really paying attention to what's going on. And I really feel like it seems like you're objectively looking at it and removing the bias and saying, okay, well, does this get me to the path? Or is this a good, helpful tool to get me down the path, or a good decision to help me continue down the path, or not? If it is, let's do it. If not, no.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Do you feel like your background in sports had a lot to do with that way of being?
I think knowing my industry inside out helps, and then obviously being the CEO, founder, you start the company, so you know a lot of aspects around what's going on. And then also I was a management consultant, which in a way, I suppose, teaches you how to think super strategically and take in a lot of factors, summarize out and whatever else. And so I'd say it's probably a combination of everything. I'm also very inquisitive. So I think naturally inquisitive, not for the sake of it. I think they're two different things. So I think being able to ask the right questions to get you where you want to go is very important, not just jumping in head first.
What did you mean by the two different types of being inquisitive?
What did I mean? Why would I naturally inquisitive? I think being able to say, so naturally inquisitive for me means when I hear something that I don't think sounds right, or when I think something's I'm at a dinner party. I may not find everyone that interesting. I won't talk to everyone just for the sake of talking to everyone and say, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? It's almost like you're kind of waiting for a spark to go off. And obviously when you run your own company, that does happen. So it's almost like I know when I hear something that I'm like, oh, that's really, that's different. So it's probably not naturally inquisitive, maybe the other way. I don't know. But the point being is I will follow the breadcrumbs to get to where I want to go, as opposed to just having a blanket approach for everything.
That's really cool. So it seems like you're not setting super far out goals, but you are very goal driven or almost very path driven. Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting dynamic.
Thanks, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. It's really cool. Have you met anybody else that has that same approach?
No, but I'm going to start asking people for sure. So what did we say? We said very path driven, but without far out goals. I'm going to ask some of my founder friends to see if it's a common theme or is it just me.
That'd be so interesting to know.
Yeah, maybe. Shit, I hope I'm not doing it all wrong.
I don't know if there is right or wrong. I certainly have no idea. But when you think about like, and maybe this competes with that the tendency to not set really long goals. But when you think of in 10,000 years from now, what you want people to remember you for, what would that be?
10,000 years.
Or whatever arbitrarily large number.
Okay. Well, 10,000, I hope they don't remember me because there must be, there should be like tons of amazing people that come between me and them in 10,000 years. Let's say I always talk about like my grandkids or great grandkids, right? What do I want them to remember me for? I think first and foremost, and it's not very entrepreneurial, but like being a good person. I think sometimes people are thought of like in business as heartless or whatever else, right? So I think like just being good to people around you, one, and then secondly is achievements, right? Like whatever I've achieved, whether it is in future years, hopefully like charitable work or adopting kids or whatever else it may be, and then obviously on the business side, like ideally open sponsorship, our company does grow to become something game changing. But let's be honest, like in today's time, if I create something game changing in the next 5-10 years, it's not living for very few companies will live for another 100 years after that. And so I think people have to be realistic about like what legacy means today, as opposed to prior. Like, will open sponsorship as a business exist in 100 years? Probably not. Mm-hmm. But should I be remembered for creating something very disruptive, as well as being female, Indian, and everything else?
When you said you want to be remembered as being a good person, mm-hmm. What does that actually mean to you?
Kind, helpful, to my network and externally. So I'd say those two things.
Why those two things?
Because I have a team, and when I think about what a good person means to a team, like, yeah, you can be a good coach and whatever else, and that will be the achievement side of things. But when I think about like, when someone's not performing and remembering, and I think it can be hard, and I'm definitely guilty of it. Someone comes in late and you're pissed off at them, and then you find out that someone in their family died. And so I think like remembering that kindness and being a human first and foremost is really important, because the people around you they chose to work with you and they chose to include you in their network. And so at the end of the day, like, yeah, people spend time with you because you're successful, you have money or whatever else, but like, will they positively reflect on you if you're not kind and helpful, I suppose, are my two words.
That's, again, a really interesting answer. So I'm curious about the problem that you're trying to solve mm-hmm. in the market. Why specifically that problem? I know you talked about it a little bit, but why specifically that problem? What about that stood out to you? It's like, this is the one for me.
Yeah. I really enjoyed sponsorship as an industry. I think it's amazing that a brand can pay some money and be in the middle of the sports action and have their logo and that, you know, in the heart of those moments that are going to live forever kind of thing. Or executives can buy a box and hang out with whoever else or whatever else. So I just thought sponsorship was fascinating. I was very frustrated with the fact that like the deal making process was not logical. You know, it wasn't meritocratic, it wasn't logical, efficient or any of those things. And so when I thought about, I mean, the inception was, why is it not an Airbnb for our industry? It just made so much sense. And it, you know, it goes back to that like clarity, I suppose. So I thought, well, why is there not an Airbnb, like just somewhere that every athlete, every sports team puts up their inventory, their availability, and then brands can transact. So it just seems so obvious to me that this should happen, and I still think that. So I suppose that was why. There's so many things I've been passionate about in terms of like small business ideas here and there, but you know, at the end of the day, it's about focusing on what you're doing right now, but B, I love the industry, and I like someone has to do this.
That's true. Do you see, excuse me, do you see any sort of like pathway into esports? And the reason why I'm curious is because, one, I'm a total nerd, and I played a whole bunch of video games growing up. But also, esports is very quickly becoming a massive phenomenon, to the point where they have stadiums full of people watching other people play on a computer. Yeah. I mean, it's ludicrous, and I'm totally a proponent of esports, right? So it's coming, it's here.
Yeah.
Do you see that working into what you're doing at all?
Yeah, so we've already started. Wow. We've done like deals for a couple of teams, a couple of athletes. The good thing is it falls into sports ultimately. There are obviously, most things in esports are dedicated to esports, right? There's not a lot of like things that cross over between NFL and esports. So it's unique that we're trying to do that. And I think the main reason why, as opposed to like setting up a whole new platform for esports, is because, you know, at the end of the day, like the same way that we have NFL and NBA sit together, or NBA and WNBA sit together, the cross-pollination is really wonderful, right? So I remember when there was an article that came out that NCAA schools were accepting esports as a scholarship, right? Mm-hmm. We're giving scholarships. I think it's so much validation for esports as an industry. And so I feel that by us putting esports as one of our many sports, we're basically saying, hey, this is a legit sport. So I think that's quite nice. The only difficulty obviously is that, you know, it's very different agents. They can offer different things. Twitch is obviously different to Instagram. And so there are nuances that I think we could do better at, but we've actually got quite a lot of esports talent on the platform. So it's definitely one that we're keeping an eye on.
Do you see esports getting bigger than non-esports, normal sports? I don't know, the opposite of esports.
As an industry, it could do. The players themselves, I don't see happening because the games change, right? So, you know, you watch a kid from 15 now because of thanks to so many social media networks. You see him go through college, you see him get drafted and whatever else. With the games being like, you know, they're a League of Legends player and then something else comes along. I don't see I don't see there being a LeBron. I mean, there are esports athletes with like millions of followers, but will they have the legacy? And also at the moment, I'd still say it's somewhat niche in terms of brands, right? So you're seeing a lot with like the gaming companies, the console companies, endemic sports to esports. You're definitely seeing like a few, like, you know, I just saw Louis Vuitton did something with esports, right? And so you're seeing that more and more. But what's interesting for us is like we're trying to tackle like a really old industry and like educate these guys. So it's like it's pretty different to take an industry. Now we have to educate you first on what esports is and whatever else. So do I see it becoming bigger for us? Not that soon, not in the next year or so. But I do see it as a growing part of our business.
Yeah, I could definitely see esports getting huge.
Yeah.
Because it's, at least to me, it seems very relatable. Like, you don't have to be 6'7" and be able to dunk a basketball.
Yeah.
Like, you just need to be able to like click buttons on a thing.
100%.
Yeah.
I also like the ability to incorporate product into the feeds. One thing that I've always struggled a bit with athletes is there's very limited what you know, they can turn up for an appearance, do a photo shoot or social media. So I've always loved like tennis and golf because you could place your logo on their shirt or whatever else. So what I do like about esports, and as we think about music in the future, is the ability to incorporate product into streams and things like that. So we actually just had an esports athlete who did like a deal with a chair company, and it was really fun, very engaging, very organic. So I think that is probably a plus point for esports is that like you're doing more than just a social post.
Right. Absolutely. I'm curious to get your take on virtual reality, because I feel like that is going to be a humongous game changer for both non-E and E sports, all sports, all sports. I should have just said that. You know, like for a football game, you could just put on your headset and you could be there, like on the field watching the players. Or for esports, you could put on your little thing and you could be in the game, like watching them or whatever it may be. How do you see VR playing into the future of not only sports, but the future of also what you do?
Okay, so in terms of future of sports, it's going to be really interesting because there's a lot of talk. You know, I was at the stadium conference I was speaking at, and it's, you know, how do we keep people coming to the games? The top games, right? Like your championships will be fine, the Super Bowls, but like the second-rate games, right? The ones where no one's really that interested. You're still having to pay money for it. Like it's cold, it's windy. Of course, the viewing experience is better at home. So I think VR will hurt your mid-level, your non-top Instagrammable games kind of thing. It's just gonna happen. But what changes, right? Like thinking long term, if the VR guys have to pay let's say a ticket fee, a seat fee for being in that seat, then does that mean that you can put that money back into the stadium and maybe make it more of a luxury experience, right? Like a lot of cinemas did, where they converted themselves to like these like upmarket, like, you know, fully whatever, like waiter service and whatever else. And so it's going to be a combined experience. The Warriors stadium's coming out, and, you know, crazy stuff going on there where the stadium's going to have like cameras that can pick up when any athlete is shooting, even in practice, and show them reels and stuff. And so I think stadiums are going to have to change because tech is coming, and it's going to come at home and it's going to come in the stadium. So that's on the sports side. It'll be interesting to see the effect, because let's say I'm not I'm not an NHL fan, right? Massive NHL fan. But thanks to VR, if I start at home enjoying NHL games, let's say someone else has it and they're like, hey, you should watch this. And suddenly I'm like, oh my God, I didn't realize, like, I love hockey. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So then what happens? Do I suddenly become a fan? And so I think it's not always like one way that like VR is going to take away. It could be, well, how do we, like, you know, the elderly population, right? They can't go to games anymore, but wouldn't it be perfect to give them more VR sets so they could like really enjoy the in-home experience? In terms of VR, I think one of the big things is like, how does that work in terms of being sociable, right? Because when I'm at a friend's house and one person's got a VR set, it's really funny to watch them, right? And twist them around and do practical jokes and whatever else. But like, it's really not like a part, like, you know, it's not like a normal setting. Like this guy's on VR, I'm on VR, you're on VR. Like I was at this Forbes conference and they all made us put on our cardboard glasses. I don't think we felt so disconnected from each other, not more connected. And so I think that's going to be the thing for VR, which is like, how do you make it normal that we can't even see each other anymore? Like maybe augmented reality is interesting because like you're still here and I'm still here and whatever else. But I think that's going to be the challenge for me. In terms of sponsorship, very quickly, obviously increases the inventory, right? Because you've got in-game, like could... if I'm watching a basketball game, could the jersey front say something different based on I'm female, so could it say Birchbox as opposed to, you know, Wish or whatever it says now, right?
Or it could like pop up right on the side and you have a little menu
exactly,
you can scroll.
Exactly. So I think inventory-wise, it's going to be interesting. But we're, as I said, same with esports, like we're still selling such like old assets that have never been connected, that for us to, I do get emails a lot like, hey, we're a new media platform, here's like new inventory. I'd say that like that is us in like 3 years. That we're populating new and new inventory. At the moment, it's just like, you know, there are NBA teams who don't have shirt patches. I want to be doing those deals. So yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming on the show today and sharing this time with me. It's been very special. I do have one more question for you.
Oh.
Then we'll wrap it up. But what question should I be asking you that I just wouldn't think to ask?
No, this is my question to you before I answer that. If you were going to describe the person that's going to listen to this answer, who you'd want to hear this answer, who would it be?
You 5 years ago.
Okay. I would say, back to our initial point, I would say make sure you decide if you want to have a plan. The question you should ask me is, when I was that age, is do you want to hold yourself so accountable to these to these things, or do you want to be flexible, and how does that impact your journey one way or the other?
That's very thoughtful.
Thanks.
So thank you very, very much, Ishveen. I'm very grateful that you share this time with me.
Awesome.
So thank you very much. And to everybody who's watching and listening, I want to thank and acknowledge you all. Your time is very valuable too, so thank you for sharing it with us today. Thank you very much again. And thank you all, and I will see all of you on the very next episode. Take care now.